Good afternoon and welcome to Grand Rapids Community College Board of Trustees candidate interviews. I'm going to call it candidate conversation rather than candidate interview. Okay. First of all, Sale, thanks so much for being willing to take this step. I think there are, I don't know how many of us up here did exactly what you are doing before we ended up saying, I know Cheryl has, I know I have, I know Kathleen has. And Brandy had, oh, all of us have. Actually, all of us have, except for Kenyatta. And that's why we have him in a box over there, because he's the only one who didn't go through this interesting process of literally applying for a board position. Well, in some ways, yes, that's really what this is. This is your opportunity to get to know us a little bit, our opportunity to get to know you a little bit. So we have some questions that we're going to ask of you. And if you have questions that you can ask of us, you may feel free to ask those at any time, okay? And because we're less time sensitive this afternoon, then all of us are also free to ask follow-up questions, okay? So each of us has a lead question that we're going to ask, and if any of us want to ask follow-up questions, so this turns more into a conversation than an interview. Okay, does that sound reasonable?
Sounds good.
Okay, all right. So you've met all of us already. So I'm going to skip the introductions and we're just going to go right to our list. And we're going to start with Brandy's first question.
Okay. Hi, Sal.
Hello.
Can you please tell us what you know about GRCC, its reputation, and its impact on the West Michigan community?
Thank you, Brandy. And first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. And I also want to thank Kathy Crosby, because I believe she was in the seat prior. And I know it wasn't an easy decision for her. I know it was a difficult one, but I just want to thank her for her service and serving in that role, whether or not I get the seat. And to answer your question, Brandy, about GRCC, I think Grand Rapids Community College plays a pivotal role in the community. I think it's a systems-wide organization that provides access to students, adults, really everyone, people that want to come here for a technical program, a certification, or a degree, or to transfer to a 4-year university. GRCC provides that. And so I think when we talk about access, when we talk about representation, and when we talk about having all communities access specific careers, I think of GRCC. I think of this being the place for education, but much more than that, community-wise. I think GRCC represents community. It represents not only students, it represents adults. It represents what a traditional or a non-traditional student looks like. And so when I think of GRCC, I simply think of opportunity. So if I was to sum it up in one way, shape, or form, I would put it that way.
Thank you. Welcome, Sal. What piqued your interest in wanting to serve on the board of Grand Rapids Community College?
What piqued my interest was the notion that I started at GRCC. My educational career started here. So I was a GRCC student. It is a family affair as well. My older sister got an associate's from here. My younger sister got an associate's from here. My mother took English classes here. A number of family members took English classes here. It starts with GRCC for my family. And so therefore I care deeply about it. I was not a good quote unquote high school student. My family moved to the Grand Rapids, Michigan area from California right around the freshman high school age. And I struggled. I went from a population of 80% plus Mexican community, and I'll say Mexican, I won't say Hispanic or Latinx. It was a farm working community, to going to the Northview School District. At the time was predominantly white. And I struggled. I couldn't adapt to the new environment. And by the time I graduated, I was working at Mercy Health for a group of radiologists, hanging x-rays at the time. And Dr. Chad Williams said, Sal, where are you going to college? I said, well, I'm going to take a year off. I'm working full time. I'm doing well here. I'm supervising other folks. I'm getting paid, a good amount, I thought. And he said, why don't you go to the junior college? And so he called it the junior college across the street. and just go see what's going on there. He forced me to go, essentially. He pushed me. He said, here, you'll get paid to go over there and check it out. And that's kind of how my career here got started. I went in to talk to an advisor to register for the following year, and he refused to let me leave without registering me for that particular semester. It was already started. It was a weekend. And he said, you have MEP money, so you can pay for your classes, you can pay for your books. If you go back to your job and you let them know that you're enrolled and they say that you can't do it, just drop the classes, you get all your money back. And certainly I did that. I said, fine. I went back to Dr. Williams and I told him I was enrolled here, and I felt bad. I apologized for that. And he said, get up. He went to the mammogram breast center, we called it at St. Mary's, where it was paying x-rays. And he told the ladies there, he said, Salvador's going to college. And everybody gave me a round of applause. That's the story. That's what happened. It sounds pretty cheesy, but that's the reality of it. And that was the first time in my life that somebody pushed me to make a decision. I went to GRCC. I got surprisingly good grades. I did well, transferred to GBSU eventually, and never looked back. And so why I want to serve it, I want to give back. And I'm passionate about this place, I always have. And so that's one of the reasons. Yep.
It's great to meet you, Sal. Thank you for coming. As a board, we oversee this publicly owned institution. In your mind, what should be the primary function of a board of a publicly owned institution?
Well, I would be lying if I didn't do a little bit of reading in terms of what the board should be doing and does. And I think some of it has to do with finances, bigger picture, the direction of where the institution is headed. Is the institution following or in line with the mission and vision of what the organization needs to be doing? I think, and I've looked at various YouTube meetings as well in terms of some of what you do when you do meet. And in addition to that, it's having like I believe this has been mentioned in the past, it's having like a 30,000 foot view of the institution in making sure that it's headed in that direction. And so when I think of the board and serving on the board, I think of bigger picture. I think of making sure that the institution's aligned well with providing access, but also providing high quality education to the folks that come here. And so it's not on the ground necessarily from what I've read, but it is making sure that questions are being raised, that we are using our resources and our connections to make sure that we're in touch with what the community needs, and then bringing back those ideas and questions to the board of trustees.
Thank you.
Sal, first of all, thank you for being here today. And so when you think about your role as a potential trustee, is there a particular perspective on leadership that will guide your thinking?
When it comes to my particular view on leadership, I think it always starts at the core of what the values are of the institution. And I think that's why I'm so drawn to places where, like K-Connect, where I currently work, and GRCC, and I serve on a number of boards. One is Alzame, Advocates for Latino Student Advancement in Michigan Education, a statewide board. And what all of those places or organizations have in common is that they have this strong mission towards equity, and the values and the mission of an organization really mean a lot to me. And so when we start talking, I was just talking to my team about this today, is when we start talking about different initiatives, strategies, missions and visions, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, we have to go back to the core values of the organization. And if we have a core set of values that we can point to, that's always going to drive us towards strategy and different initiatives. And so whenever we get lost a little bit, or we can't find our way, or we don't know what we're going to do next, look at the core values of where you work, what the team abides by. And as a leader, I think we consistently have to make sure that we do that with our team. Are we going back to the core of what we do? Are we driving towards access? Are we driving towards equity? Are we looking at the disparities that exist and how we can close those gaps? I think those are some of the bigger picture systemic questions that sometimes as a leader you have to bring up. As a leader, it's also important not to shy away from difficult conversations, as long as we're open-hearted and open-minded about moving those conversations forward, I believe that's another piece that one needs to have as a leader to drive work forward.
So you talked about values driving strategy, and it just made me think about, so what are some of your personal values?
Some of my personal values include, family. I think family, community is a big part of what forms my values. When we think about the core of who one is, we all have to think, okay, what is it that drives you? And what drives me and motivates me is having access to a variety of systemic pieces that make us who we are. Like what got me here was a community of people. And so when I think of what drives me and what my values are, they're very closely connected to family, to team, to community. When I think of what really matters to me, and I had to sit back a couple of days ago, I was running around, I was really stressed, and I was a little bit anxious about a meeting that was coming up. And I just sat down for a second and I thought, okay, what drives you? And I think that's where my values came back. I said, okay, what motivates me is family, is honestly equity in a lot of part of my work. When I talk about my story and where I came from, I often talk about equity because I had a lot of challenges, a lot of barriers. We talked a little bit about that when we were chatting earlier, but there's a lot of barriers that exist. But if we're not driving against those barriers with positive outcomes, with at least a positive energy, then we really can't get to the end of the road. And so family is the core of everything I do. It was at the core of everything I did at GVSU for almost 7 years, at the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan prior to that, and in healthcare for almost 8 years. And so the same piece has driven my work everywhere I've been.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you again for being here. You mentioned real quick at the end, you mentioned your work with GVSU. This next question is really if you could expand on the experiences that you've had with education in Michigan and how you feel those experiences will could influence you as a board member.
Sure, thank you. At Grand Valley State University, I worked in diversity recruitment and retention work. One of the most beautiful parts of that work was that I was able to oversee places like Chicago, Detroit, Flint, and I was able to travel to some of those places. And typically every year I would travel to the Flint and Detroit area and visit about 60 high schools. So I would visit about 60 high schools and different community colleges in that area for a number of years. And that allowed me to not only get a lens of what it's like or not like here in the county, and Ottawa counties, but it also allowed me to see what other communities are like. And walking into schools in Flint and Detroit really gave me a different perspective. Living in those areas for weeks at a time gave me a different perspective about what students go through. And so that was one of my favorite parts of my job, to be honest, is walking into those schools and talking to students. And so that was a big part of it. In addition to that, I was also an inclusion advocate at GVSU. So I sat around a number of different human resource-led groups for hiring different staff. And so that gave me a different kind of view. It gave me a kind of a view behind the scenes of what it's like to hire different folks and to be that person that is an inclusion advocate to make sure that equitable practices are in place to hire a variety of different people. And so I was able to sit into a lot of rooms. It's probably why I'm quite comfortable meeting in front of you today. It's because I was on the other side so many times and I kind of got a good feel for it. And so, that was a big part of my job that I really enjoyed as well. And in addition to that, I helped build pipeline programs at GVSU. Part of my thesis during my master's of communications was looking at inclusion and advocate management systems. And one of the areas I was able to focus on was the retention of underrepresented students, specifically the Latinx population. And so with a collective impact approach at GVSU, we were collectively able to build a program called Laker Familia. And we turned that program from an orientation welcome program into a full-blown retention program that's now recognized by the College Board and different entities. And through that model, part was created through my thesis at GVSU, came Black Excellence Orientation. And now there are 2 additional programs that are starting, the Native and Asian programs at GVSU. So that's all work that I'm very proud of that came out of some of those initiatives. So recruitment, retention, that's all part of some of the work that I have in terms of experience with higher education. Did a lot of transfer work as well. Worked with a lot of students and groups from GRCC that would come to GVSU. And I would be able to personally give them tours and then try to get them to come to GVSU after being done at GRCC.
Sal, looking at your CV, you have a lot of different experiences. And this question is going to focus on your business experience. So what experiences have you had in the business community? And how might those experiences influence you as a board member?
Thank you. In terms of my business experience, when I was at the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan, I was the director of language access. And the Department of Language Access required me to make sure that we were providing training and at times certification for professional interpreters in the area. And so this program in particular, this department at the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan was very unique because it acted really like a business. It was a business that was focused on obtaining funding that would drive the rest of the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan organization. And so we had a lot on our plate. Oftentimes we said that our department helped keep the lights on at the Hispanic Center because we would essentially sell services to different healthcare providers. In fact, our interpreters even provided a Spanish interpretation for the GRPS board meetings consistently on a monthly basis. So behind the scenes that we're interpreting and then on YouTube, folks could access that. So we provided services to social workers, educators, and healthcare providers. And so that operated very much like a business. I had to do the accounting. I had to wear many hats. I had to be the HR. I think we went from having a team of 2 or 3 to with a variety of contractors to I think we had 20 part-time employees and 15 contractors by the time I was done 3 years later, with a lot of the folks being certified on a national scale. So the business was going into the community and making sure that we were selling that service, but it was more than the service, it was providing access to people. And again, that's what kind of drove me to do that work. But it was a business because 24/7, my cell phone was going off. And then typically if somebody needs an interpreter, they're not calling you 8 to 5. It's on a regular basis. So I was essentially in charge of what was called the business there. At the time I received the 2012, I think it was, Hispanic Chamber of Commerce Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And that's when I was like, wait a minute, am I in the business or am I in the nonprofit sector? And that's where I realized that I was essentially running more of a business. So a lot of the skills that I gained, the hats that I wore, I have the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan to thank for that.
So earlier, I don't think I thanked you for, taking time out of your busy schedule and applying and being here. So thank you. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
And I'm going off script. So the first question is March 2020, I think marked a pivot for many people, or the word is recalibration. And a lot of people are now talking about what they have learned in COVID and what they have learned based on everything else that's happening in the world. I wonder what you would say you've learned that might influence how you govern if you were sitting here or wherever on the side of the table.
Oof, that's a big one. But what I've learned in terms of what's happening with the COVID-19 pandemic, and one, I still think we're right in the middle of it in many ways. But one of the things that I learned was that it's a time to innovate. It's the time to really honestly force people to come together at times when they couldn't be further apart. And I wish no pandemic upon anyone. Don't get me wrong. It's one of those things that I wish that hadn't happened. But when we take a look and take a step back, it's really forced folks to think about wealth inequality and wealth inequities, because it's really everybody's taken a hit. And the first folks that took the hit, if we take a look at it, it was people from underrepresented backgrounds, the Black and Latinx folks, for instance. We saw disparity gaps get wider. We saw us perpetuate some of the issues that were happening and double them. But then if you fast forward to where we are now, corporations and businesses are taking the hit. And now folks are talking about wealth inequality being a big issue, and how folks that typically aren't at the table are now wanting to be at the table because now we have a problem. And so what we've learned is that the pandemic is really affecting all of us. It's affecting some more than others. And if I go to my family, if I visit my parents today, nothing has changed for them. Sure, things are challenging, but they've always been challenging. Things have always been hard for some of us. Now things are hard for a lot of us, and for a specific population of people that typically were maybe too far away from the issue. The pandemic's really forced us all to come together in one way, shape, or form, whether we want to or not, to address some of the systemic issues that have been affecting us for, I'll just go ahead and say, since the beginning of time, forever. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but it's really forced me to think critically about how it affects everyone. And typically, we take a look at what affects us around our bubble. And this has really caused us to think critically about the systems that at play.
Thank you. And back on script with my question, it is, please share any previous experiences you have had on other boards of any type, including community-based boards. And you've talked about this a little bit, but it's an opportunity to clarify or expound.
Yeah, so I currently serve as the president of ALSAME, or Advocates for Latino Student Advancement of Michigan Education. And it brings different professionals from across the state, from Detroit, East Lansing, Mount Pleasant, a variety of different places. And folks from GRCC are also represented within that network. And so it's one of the boards that I serve on. In the past, I've served on different alumni boards as well. I've community-based. One of the ones that maybe I'm most proud of was co-founding, along with someone that you may know, Carlos Sanchez and I got together years ago and looked at what the Latina network of West Michigan was doing. We were very impressed, and we're thinking, like, that's amazing. How can we step up our game in the community to break down some barriers for Latino individuals in the area? And so with Carlos Sanchez, Santiago, and other folks, Santiago Gaiton and other folks, we got together and started the Latino network of West Michigan. And so that's something that we were able to create in the community to help break away from stereotypes. I'm a father. Latinos can be scholars, Latinos can be fathers, Latinos can be cooks, Latinos can be many things. And so the initial thought was getting the social aspect of this group to get together and do some great things in the community with the blueprint of the great Latina network of West Michigan. So I have to give it up to them for that. But that was one that I was particularly proud of. I'm still part of that network. It's not an official board necessarily, but it is one that I'm very proud of in terms of building community. So those are a few that I can think of right off the bat.
Sal, you mentioned earlier the 30-foot view, which is one of the hallmarks of a policy-based governance system. Can you share more of your understanding of policy-based governance with us?
But it's the first word that comes to mind in this intro is maybe limiting in some ways, right? Like, because you could only do a certain amount. There are folks that are the faculty and staff that are on the ground doing the work that the board trusts to do high quality work. And then there are folks at the policy level that are looking at the big picture of sorts of the institution. And so when I think about policy based, I think about some limitations, but also that space gives you a certain amount of space to think and think critically about what needs to be done. And I hate to use this example again, some people are probably sick of hearing me say this, but I went to visit my doctor's office for a physical earlier this year. And he said, "Hey, what do you do?" I was, collective impact systems building, can connect. And then I explained to him that we are, further away from some of the challenges, but we're able to look at the system overall, system building. And he said, "Oh, so it's kind of like me. I'm a physician. And if I was to decide who gets the vaccine, then that wouldn't be right, because you would get the vaccine and then you would get the vaccine. And whoever's out the door, whoever's next gets the vaccine, because that's my role. It's a frontline person. That's what my ethical role is." But if there wasn't a group of folks that is able to take a step back and take a look at the entire system and make sure that we have an equitable way of deciding who gets the vaccine and who's seen, then that group in itself would probably make a quote unquote better decision than me. And so when I take a look at boards and structures and policy, I take a look at a group of people that maybe is separate from the folks on the ground, but it doesn't mean that they're not listening, they're not asking questions, and then they're not extremely informed, because you have to be extremely informed in order to make those type of decisions. And that's what I think about when I think about policy and structure.
Thank you. Just to follow up, have you served on any boards using policy-based governance?
I can't say that I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sal, what's your perspective on future needs of the college?
Future needs of the college. So the pandemic is certainly something that I think GRCC's been on the news for a variety of things. I've checked it on your website as well in terms of helping with the vaccine and access to that. But I think future needs for the college is really thinking critically and innovatively about what are the careers that are currently needed, what are the technical or certifications that are needed for our community. It's we know there are a lot of dollars are coming into our communities. How are those dollars being dispersed? How are they being used? I think that's something that is critical, not only at GRCC, but as a community at large. I think we hear a lot of national news about some dollars hitting counties and folks. How are those dollars turning into access to people that need them the most? And in terms of education, I think GRCC is going to play a big role in how people learn and the kind of careers that we need in our communities. And so immediate needs or the future involves making sure that folks that historically haven't had access to education have an opportunity now. The folks that are losing their jobs or they're looking at careers differently have the ability to come here and get an education. Those are some of the things that come to mind that are immediately going to be needs. And we don't know. Ultimately, we don't know what's going to happen and what the ultimate effect of the pandemic is going to be. So being able to pivot or adjust is something that I think is important for GRCC.
So we've asked you a number of questions. You may have some questions for us. If you do, now would be the time to ask those. Feel no obligation to ask questions. This isn't one of those interviews where they, oh my goodness, I got to make sure I have a few questions. But if you have any, now is a good time to ask them.
I do have some questions. Yeah, I figured, you're doing it to me, so I'm going to do it to you. And
We have 30 seconds left. That's it. So go ahead. What do
you mind if I sit on the other side?
Yeah, we don't mind at all. Yeah. We'll just each take turns sitting where you're sitting. Go ahead.
So this is really for anyone to answer, or you can take turns up to you all. As a board of trustee, do you have a lot of interactions with faculty and staff? If so, what does that look like?
Let me try to answer that one for you, okay? And it really relates to philosophically Kathleen's questions about policy governance. So we have one employee, the board does, and that employee is the president of the college. So our primary relationship is with the president of the college. That's who we serve, that's who serves us, that's who we hold accountable. But in order to do that and to do that well, we also need to be informed in terms of the general operations of the college. And there's no way to do that effectively without being connected in some way to do that. So do we have a lot of interaction? We've had no interaction in the last 15 months. We felt that. We don't have those organic connections. We haven't had those organic connections. Prior to that, though, for sure. The way we do that is for you to, or for us to increase our understanding of the college. That's all quarterbacked through the president's office. So if we wish to meet with a group or visit a group or whatever the case is, it gets coordinated through the president's office.
I'd just like to add that there is informal interaction at, say, the community connections breakfast that we have with the foundation to meet recipients of scholarships through the foundation. There will be faculty there. There are plenty of events that trustees are invited to where we can interact with and meet and talk to faculty.
The ugly sweater contest at Christmas time is one of those ideal ways you could interact with as many staff as you wanted to. I don't know that any of us up here have ever participated in the ugly sweater contest, but I'm guessing now that I've mentioned it, some of you are tempted to do that.
I know I am.
Sounds
Hey,
important.
Dave, let me add to that a little bit in the sense that I think you guys hit it right on the head, but as a new board member, one of the things you have to do is make sure you know what hat you have on. Because in our roles, we're very involved in the community where you could be at church and get a GRCC question. I could be at work and get a GRC question. I've got family that goes to GRC. And just making sure you understand what hat you have on, and that, if it's something significant, half my questions, I end up directing them to Misty. Misty is Dr. Pink's assistant, and she can handle most of the things that I actually need. There are times where I have to direct people to Dr. Pink himself, but often I'm just out in the community. I'm representing the college. We've all got our 30-second speech about, what are the benefits of the college. So people might be asking us about, frontliner scholarships, or they might be asking us about middle college. And so we've all, prepared our 30-second speech to be great advocates for the college. Particularly in your role, you're going to see a lot of people in the community. You probably know faculty already. I have a lot of friends that are faculty, so we're always having conversations, but I always remember which hat I have on when I'm having those conversations.
And that's particularly not challenging, but the opportunities. And we look around the table. So Kenyatta works for an organization that has a professional connection to the college. Daniel works for an organization that has a professional connection to the college. Brandy works for an organization that has a professional connection. K-Connect has a professional connection to the college. So there will always be these times where you're wondering, okay, what role am I playing? Am I the president of K-Connect here, or am I a trustee? And you can figure that out. I mean, that's I'm guessing that if you ever find yourself wondering, we've got a lot of experience around this table of men and women who dance that dance with what hat am I wearing here now?
Thank you. And the next question is for everyone, I suppose. What is one thing about serving on the board that you really enjoy? And then what is one challenge, whichever order you want to go in? And
let's all answer that.
Sure.
You want to start, Brandy?
Sure. I think I'm new. So one of the newer board members, and what I would say is what has been so refreshing is the affirmation of the service and the reach of GRCC. I already knew that it was an amazing organization that provides service to a lot of different people. And in this role, just deepening my understanding of that reach in the service, as well as getting a perhaps more front row seat and seeing the amazing work that staff, faculty engage in on behalf of students in our community. I think that has been the most refreshing. And perhaps the most challenging is, I think all of us are doers. And remembering that the doing at this table looks very different than my day-to-day in terms of, again, maintaining that balcony view and remembering the hat. So still learning the nuances of it, but I think it's a beautiful, amazing organization that is a staple for the community that's just been solidified in this seat.
Cheryl?
I don't think I could say anything more articulately than Brandy about the influence and impact of this college. Unimaginable is its absence within the community, just as it's the geographic heart of the community. The tangibility, the feeling, the walking through campus, the talking to students, and their exuberance about this life-saving college for many is overwhelming as an honor. Challenge is a personal challenge, understanding the budget.
That's how we made her treasurer of the organization. Thanks, Cheryl. Kathleen?
I would say one of the best things is seeing up close how this institution and community colleges generally, but particularly obviously this institution in our community is a solution to so many of the challenges that our community faces right now. Economic, social, racial, day-to-day basis, it's a solution. One of the biggest challenges is trying to identify and understand and then adjust the ways in which this institution, like all institutions in existence right now, might perpetuate some of the barriers and the challenges that we exist here. We know exist here, and that all the faculty and staff know exist as well.
Daniel?
The danger of going towards the end is everyone said all the good things and then you just end up reiterating what everyone said. But I really would and just connect with being able to have a front row seat to all of the things that happen with the college throughout community. That, you know, from the previous vantage point you see, but you just get so much more information and in real time. I mean, I get multiple emails from Misty every day of things that are happening, and it's sort of almost overwhelming the number of things that are happening. It's also really exciting to be that advocate out in community and be able to have those stories and share and make those connections and help and even see when people are, oh, I didn't know that happened, or I hadn't heard that yet. And so that part of it has been really rewarding, I think, for me to be able to have that information, feel like armed with it, to be able to go out and advocate for the community college and you know, out in community. I think to echo what Brandy said, you know, my background is like doing in education. So I think often it's like, well, how are we going to solve, you know, it's like, okay, take the step back at what are the questions that I actually want to ask? How can I ask them in a way that's going to help, you know, move this work forward based on the seat that I'm sitting in for this particular thing. And so, you know, that, and then the other challenge, frankly, has been, this is the first in-person thing that, you know, that I've been to as a trustee. So doing and learning and getting to know personalities and all of that virtually has been a bit of a challenge for me, but I appreciate being here now and appreciate having a chance to learn even more about you and your history and background and story.
Thanks. Kenyatta?
So let me hit the rewards first. I think it's sort of cool that we have a diversity of why we enjoy the work that we do. But you may know that I'm an executive at a manufacturer here, and we've got a career ladder, and certain careers require certain educational requirements, and we give $3,000 scholarships to all of our employees if they want to attend the community college. And one of the most rewarding things is at graduation, as you walk across, they're walking across the stage, I get to shake the hand of some of our employees, right? And seeing the joy in their face and knowing what that means. We talk about equity, and I realize that education is not the cure-all for everything, but in many situations, it's a step forward, and it provides some opportunities that you may not have had. And I just really, really enjoy that. The challenge, and I think we've heard that from a couple different people, is that you know, we're all very busy, and you could spend 40 hours a week doing stuff for the college. So I think the challenge is balance, knowing what you need to do and and some of the stuff you just do because you enjoy doing it. I remember last year, just sitting at a basketball game with Dr. Pink, just having a good time. And there's some activities that, you know, you want to be there representing the college, but some of the things you like to do is just sitting in a class. And I went to a cooking class probably 2 years ago now. And just, once again, seeing the excitement and the creativity and the joy of these future chefs makes it all worthwhile, and just trying to balance both those things.
Thanks. So I'll take a different angle. Joy. For me, one joy is who I get to hang with around this table. And when I look at my colleagues around this table, we're a fairly diverse bunch. And if we can figure out as a diverse bunch how to lean into uncomfortable conversations and do that well, and if we can model that, that's a pretty significant governance gift to an organization. I've worked for boards my entire life. I've been on that side of the aisle my entire life. So my entire life professionally, I've critiqued questions like, so how does a board add fuel to my energy? How does that board really enhance the mission of the organization? I don't know how many board meetings I didn't prepare for, or quite frankly, I wish I didn't have a board meeting because it was just one more thing to do. I don't want this board to ever be that board to Dr. Pink. I want this board to be that board that adds energy, that adds focus, and adds fuel to his tank. So that's my joy. That's my joy. Challenges, it's big. I mean, it's huge. I've had times in my career where I could make a decision on Monday and we'd be moving in a new direction on Tuesday, and I could change my mind on Wednesday and we're moving into a different direction on Thursday. Now, I mean, it's that rudder, just the movement. So for us to try to figure out what's around the corner as a board is an incredible challenge, and that's our challenge. Do you have any other questions for us?
No, that's all I
That's
got.
good. Okay. All right. All right. So Sal, let me tell you what's going to happen next. All right. We have some policy mandates that are dictated to us by people more important than us, and that's called the state mandates or whatever, that don't allow us to make decisions at a group like this. We just talk and we inform ourselves, and decisions are actually made at a formal board meeting. So the decision of whether or not to invite you around this table is going to happen at our next meeting, which is June 21. Yeah, June 21. Okay. And so what will happen? What will happen is we will put our heads together on that particular day, and we will accept a motion to respond to your interest to sit around this table. We certainly hope that between now and then, your interest only accelerates and not diminishes. Okay, so that's our encouragement to you. So bear with us. We're not as nimble as we'd like to be. We'd love to make a decision right now, but unfortunately, we're not able to make that decision right now. So with that, again, thanks for the 45 minutes. You demonstrated to us that you could be part of this learning community. As you're discussing with us, you're stretching our thinking, and we hope we're stretching your thinking. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I actually have one more question that I just thought of, if I may.
You may, sure.
This, obviously, we're appointing somebody to fill Trustee Crosby's seat. And that seat is up in, I believe, 4 years. Have you given any thought to running?
The correction is it's up sooner than that. The correction is it's up in 2 years.
2 years.
But that doesn't minimize the most important part of your question.
I have, if appointed, I have 100% intention to run for that seat.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Question.
Thanks for asking. Anyone else? All right, so I will adjourn this, and I think what happens is you guys just turn the cameras off, right? So this meeting is now adjourned.
Cameras on, microphones on.
Hot mic.